Hey, everybody, it's Evan Grant from DallasNews.com and the Dallas Morning News, your occasionally friendly, often grumpy Rangers insider, with another edition of This Week in Rangers Baseball. I know it's been a while since we've talked, everybody. It has been an eventful July. A lot went on, not much of it good for the Rangers. Um, and we're going to get into a lot of stuff here, talking mostly about projects ahead of 2025 and what the Rangers need to determine before the end of the season. But before we get into that, let's take care of the housekeeping. Listen, if you like these videos, I need all the feedback I can get. As you can tell, this is not a face made for video. Um, don't know if my voice carries well, or if you need more joy, because I don't know how joyful I get. But anyway, if you like the videos, please hit like on YouTube and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It goes a long way with everybody to let us know that this is something that's important to you in our coverage. All right, now on to the coverage. Let's talk about where this club is. Just answered an email from somebody who was a little bit disappointed that our game stories over the last few days, quote unquote game stories, haven't been so much about the game and they've been more about issues or projects. And my answer basically is this is where this team is. It's no longer about individual results for 2024. At least not, it's not as important. It is about gaining momentum for 2025. It is about getting answers for 2025. Both GM Chris Young last week and manager Bruce Bochy acknowledged that this team is not going to go back to the playoffs in all likelihood. It's not going to defend its World Series title. I don't think this is going to be a 90-loss team, but the Rangers are going to end up with one of the worst 3 or 4 overall records for a defending world champion in the last, well, since Major League Baseball went to a 162 game schedule. So what's the number one project? There's a ton of stuff the Rangers need to answer on the field, but I want to talk a little bit about vision first. I think vision's really important, and I think it is the most important project the Rangers need to address this before this offseason. We've written, Kevin Sherrington wrote earlier this summer about the lack of a contract for GM Chris Young, a contract extension for GM Chris Young. I answered a question about that last week in Evan Help Us. And I don't think that the Rangers can really attack any of their long-term issues, and there are a lot of them, until ownership settles the situation regarding GM Chris Young. It is a unique situation. Chris obviously was born and raised in Dallas, grew up a Rangers fan, played for the Rangers, wanted to come to the Rangers when he had a chance while he was working with Major League Baseball to go elsewhere. Came here as the number 2 guy to John Daniels, thinking that this would be kind of a long-term apprenticeship, several years. Ended up being a little bit more than a year before he was moved into the GM spot. And John was let go. But at the time that the Rangers moved Chris Young into the GM spot, there was no contract, no long-term contract there. There was no real change in titles. He technically already was the GM. The Rangers just did away with the president of baseball operations. So even when he assumed more duties, and quite frankly, Chris Young carries the duties of more like 3 people here than one. Most front offices now have a 2-headed monster in terms of baseball operations, with a GM and a president of baseball operations. And most clubs have a more visible president than the Rangers do on the business side. Neil Liebman handles the business side, but he is not really a spokesman for the club. Anything that comes out of the club really regarding the organization overall becomes the domain of the general manager because of the way the Rangers are set up. And so you've got a situation where in 2022, when Ray Davis decided to make a change at GM, he could have extended Chris Young at that point in time and could have said, okay, you give me your 5-year vision, or let's get your 5-year vision down this winter, and let's put that in writing. The Rangers opted not to do that. Well, in 2023, they won a World Series. And listen, with a World Series go some spoils. It may be a bonus for some people. Um, for the general manager of the team, it usually comes with a long-term contract extension. It has not. And the fact that we are sitting here in the latter stages of August and Chris Young is 6 weeks away from becoming a free agent, might I dare say, perhaps the most attractive free agent, potential free agent on the market, players or otherwise. Yes, Pete Alonso will be on the market. Yes, Juan Soto will potentially be on the market. But an organization, there are two ways to build an organization. One was with vision that adds talent, and that's usually the easier route than to have some talent and then try and apply a vision. So I think that Chris could be really attractive to a number of teams, big profile teams that could be searching for general managers or presidents of baseball operations after the season. And the fact that the Rangers still have not solved this um, leads to a number of issues. Number one, if Chris Young were to decide that he was going to walk away, where would the Rangers go? Would they turn to assistant GM Ross Fenstermaker, Chris's top lieutenant? Very possibly. Here's the catch: Ross Fenstermaker, I believe, also is tied up in terms of Young's situation. He's not signed beyond this year. Um, you could make the argument that just promoting him to the the top baseball operations executive might be a way to keep him if Chris were to leave. Same point in time, if Chris Young leaves, would Ross Fenstermaker go with him somewhere in a package deal? Would they be two guys who could go somewhere else in a GM slash president of baseball operations role? Uh, and if the Rangers were to lose both of them, then you're looking at an October in which you're trying to fill your top two executives and handle a number of looming decisions about payroll, about uh, arbitration cases. It could create a real mess. And I also want to add that look, Bruce Bochy, who Chris Young brought here as GM, as manager, um, is entering the final year of his contract in 2025. Uh, Bruce came out of 3 years worth of retirement to work with Chris Young. I don't know that there's any guarantee that Bruce Bochy, having now won 4 World Series, would need to manage in 2025 if he didn't have the situation that he felt was um, most simpatico, most in touch with his own vision. Um, so there is, I think, before the Rangers can tackle any any of their on-field issues, they really need to resolve the GM situation. Uh, if there's a stalemate over contract negotiations, um, then maybe the sides need to say, okay, we're going to go separate ways, and the Rangers can get a head start on the search. I don't think that's the case. Chris Young has been a GM for 3 years. He's won a World Series. Nobody bats 333 as a GM. Nobody. So the first move that the Rangers have to make comes from ownership. It has to come from Ray Davis. And there are a number of complications here. Yes, the Rangers are continuing to deal with an uncertain TV landscape. Spoiler alert, so are a number of clubs. And the market may change on free agents. The landscape may change for baseball, at least temporarily, as the quote unquote guaranteed revenue streams that were associated with long-term contracts for regional sports networks go away or are reduced, and there is more uncertainty. But if you allow your head of baseball operations to walk out the door, you're facing a whole slew of uphill challenges. Not to mention the fact that August is, I do want to say this, August is the longest month in baseball, right? April, May, the season is still early. June, you're talking about the All-Star game coming up, and the trade deadline throughout July. Uh, August, there's no holidays. Uh, it is hot. You're not quite to the sprint that ends the regular season, and it is the time of worry in baseball. Um, Teams that are in a pennant race, have to fight through what everybody calls the dog days to get to September to contend. Teams that are out of the pennant race, all it does is raise concerns. You're looking at the future, guys who are not under contract, um, throughout baseball front offices are concerned about their futures. We've seen a number of clubs already let go of some scouts. The New York Mets let go of three key executives as David Stearns reorganizes that front office. And so there is trepidation and worry really in all front offices. Um, and I don't know how you operate, but I know when I deal with anxiety, uh, I'm probably not as focused on my job as I'd like to be. And I think that's kind of a human instinct. And so I don't know if this is if the Rangers are creating the most productive situation in which to attack the on-field issues that they need to attack. And there are a number of them. Look, I wrote about the enigma that is Leody Taveras last week or earlier this week. And Leody is arbitration eligible this offseason. Um, he has over 1,500 major league at bats. He is a 650-ish OPS guy for his career, save for 1 month last year, May, when he had a 950 OPS for a month. Really, he's been what he's been throughout his career. He's a above average outfielder who could be elite. He's got great tools, but hasn't fully realized them. And you question whether or not, after 4.5 years in the big leagues, if a guy is going to fully realize them. There are late bloomers. Nelson Cruz was a late bloomer. Bruce Bochy mentioned Brandon Crawford in San Francisco, who was a late bloomer. Do you want to bet on late bloomers? Or in baseball, you usually cite predictability, the predictability of numbers. After 1,500 at bats, usually you think a guy is what he is. But Leody is 26, or he's going to be 26 in September, early September. And so there's an outlier there. Maybe he's an outlier. Roster wise, I think the Rangers are going to reduce payroll. I think they're going to try and get down below 240 million, which is where the CBT threshold is. We can do a whole segment on CBT thresholds and how that works. But here's what you need to know: Rangers will pay for the second straight year. Um, if they were to go over the CBT next year, they'd be paying a minimum of 45% on their overage. Um, Billionaires scream about paying any tax, and it's gone from 20 the first year of being in the CBT bracket to 32, then it would go to 45. That's not going to go over well. So my instinct is that the Rangers will try and get below 240 million, and 240 million is not payroll alone. You have to factor in about $18 million uh, for benefits and the contribution to the pre-arbitration pool. Um, you have to factor in, like, if you're going to be, you have to factor in some flexibility as well. If you're going to be in the pennant race next year, you may need to add some payroll over the course of the year. And if you shave down below 240 million and then go over 240 when everything is calculated over the course of the year, you haven't done yourself any favors. So probably means you need to give yourself another $5 to $10 million worth of working room. So you're talking about getting under 220 million. And right now, on 5 players alone, Jacob deGrom, Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia, and Tyler Mahle, the Rangers are committed $125 million for next year. I mean, that's not good, but that's over 50% for 20% of your roster. They have a number of young players who are going to be inexpensive. But from my perspective, besides figuring out what they want to do in center field, if Leote is where they want to go, his salary is probably going to double to close to $5 million. Nathaniel Lowe's salary is going to go from 7 million to above $10 million if the Rangers tender him a contract. Jonah Heim's contract is going to go above $5 million if the Rangers tender him a contract as arbitration eligible. If you factor all that in, the Rangers still are going to need, in my mind, at least two starting pitchers. Right now, what I've got on my list as signed would be DeGrom, Malley, Cody Bradford, and Dane Dunning, who, in my estimation, the Rangers have made very clear that they would like to use in a bullpen role more than as a starter. And John Gray. That's five. That's five. You're not going to get through the season with five starters. And in a perfect world, you believe that Dunning and maybe even Bradford are best suited for more middle innings roles in the bullpen. So I figure the Rangers need one or two starters, probably two. In the bullpen, the Rangers have been great at the back end with David Robertson and Kirby Yates. Guess what? They're both free agents next year. So is Jose Leclerc. Um, I know Jose Leclerc has been inconsistent, but he's basically been the Rangers' seventh inning guy. So you're going to need two relievers in the back of that bullpen to be competitive. And I think that after this season, after watching Wyatt Langford struggle as a rookie more than you expected, after seeing Evan Carter go down, and after seeing the regression in several positions, right field, you can't overlook the fact that Marcus Semien is not having nearly the same year that he is having. Not talking about replacing Marcus Semien. I'm not necessarily talking about replacing Adolis Garcia, but my point is the Rangers are going to need to add a bat or two. So by my estimation, whether through trade or free agency, the Rangers are going to need to add 5 to 6 players over the course of the winter. How much money they've got to deal on that front? Man, that's going to be a good question. We just talked about $125 million already committed. You add in the arbitration players and the number of players who will be here who are pre-arb, you're over 150 million. So maybe you've got 50, $60 million to deal with to fill 5 or 6 positions. $10 million per player. It'll get you a reliever. It'll get you frontline or quality middle relievers, but the going rate for a serviceable starting pitcher, about $15 million a year. Going rate for a proven power hitter is above $20 million a year. So those are all questions that the Rangers are going to have to answer. And to go back to my first point, it's going to be really hard if you've got to answer that after October 1st. If you don't have a plan in place, or actually after November 1st, the GM meetings are the second or the first week of November. The winter meetings are the first week of December. There is a lot for the Rangers to consider. And if you're having to restart on your vision when this season ends, boy, it puts you behind a lot of clubs. It puts you behind a lot of teams. And I think the only thing that could make the situation more disappointing for the Rangers than 2024 has been is to think that 2023 would be a one-off year, that the Rangers would be another version of the 2007 Colorado Rockies. The Rangers at least won the World Series when they went last year. Colorado went in 2007, hasn't really been heard from since. Kansas City had a 2-year run in 2014 and then one in 2015. And the Royals are just now getting back to competitiveness. You open a window of contention, which the Rangers feel like they have in 2023. And yes, there are going to be some steps backwards along the way. There are going to be some outlier years. But you expect to be able to contend for multiple years. And if the Rangers take another step back in 2025, it's really going to be a difficult thing for fans to swallow. We'll get more into the GM situation if it doesn't get resolved. We'll get more into projects over the last month of the season. But for now, I think this is the first thing the Rangers have to figure out how to address is how to make their long-term vision real, permanent, and stable. Awkward pause. I really don't have anything more. I think I've hit you with a lot here this week. I hope everybody is doing well. I'd love to hear from you. My email is egrant@dallasnews.com. You know, on Twitter, you can find me at Evan_P_Grant. Let me hear from you. I know that people have questions. I know that people have thoughts. I'd love to hear them. It really helps inform my coverage. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Take care. This is good video.